Dueling replacements for Obamacare. Two Republican presidential candidates unveil competing plans to jettison President Obama's health care system once he leaves the White House. This is Special Report. Good evening. I'm Shannon Bremen for Brett Baer. It is one of a handful of policy planks unanimously agreed to by all 17 Republican presidential hopefuls that whoever wins in 2016 gets rid of Obamacare. But the answer to the question of what would replace it could be the difference between winning and losing the party's nomination tonight. We're getting a look at two proposals. Chief Political Correspondent Carl Cameron has our top story.
Overshadowed by Donald Trump and slipping in the polls, Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker unveiled his Freedom Plan to replace the Affordable Care Act.
On my very first day as President of the United States, I will send legislation to the Congress to once and for all repeal Obamacare entirely.
Walker would replace it with several popular GOP alternatives and reforms. Tax credits for private health insurance, block granting Medicaid to the states, letting people shop for insurance across state lines, and more. He'd pay for it with Medicaid savings and by eliminating $1 trillion in taxes.
I may not be the flashiest of the folks. I may not have the pizzazz of people on the east or the west coast, but I hope you see not just here in Minnesota, but across America, I think like you think. I'm willing to stand up against anyone to get the job done. We're not intimidated.
Louisiana Governor Bobby Jindal accused Walker in a statement of embracing lifelong coverage under Medicare by tying it to age. Quote, "It is frankly shocking that a Republican candidate for president would author a cradle-to-grave plan like this." Marco Rubio put his health care goals in a Wall Street Journal op-ed yesterday and attacked Obamacare in the rain today at the Iowa State Fair.
We have to repeal it, and we have to replace it with something that gives every American the opportunity to acquire the health insurance they want with their own pre-tax money from any company in America across state lines that will sell it to them.
The latest poll has Trump in the 20s, Jeb Bush in the teens, and Dr. Ben Carson leading the single digits pack at 9. Carson's under fire from the left for suggesting recently that Planned Parenthood is the result of a racist conspiracy.
One of the reasons that you find most of their clinics in black neighborhoods is so that you can find a way to control that population. And I think people should go back and read about Margaret Sanger, who founded this place, a woman who Hillary Clinton, by the way, says that she admires. Look and see what many people in Nazi Germany thought about her.
One day after Jeb Bush trashed Donald Trump's immigration plan as impracticable, Bush either conflated him with Mrs. Clinton or awarded him a cabinet-level title.
I hope that Secretary Trump takes advantage of app to be able to have a sit-down conversation and have a detailed conversation about things of substance.
Meanwhile, John Kasich's getting bashed by Democrats as for the Iraq War before he was against it for this.
Well, look, I would never have committed ourselves to Iraq.
In November of 2002, the former congressman said, quote, "We should go to war with Iraq. It's not likely that Saddam Hussein will give up his weapons."
But back then, most members of Congress believed Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction in both parties. So, in fact, Hillary Clinton was, quote, for invading Iraq before she was against it too, Shannon.
Yeah, we remember well. Carl, thank you. Good to see you. All right, coming on up later on the show, my one-on-one with Governor Walker. We're going to talk more about his health care plan that Carl outlined and also his presidential campaign. With a scandal-plagued campaign that looks less and less like a sure thing every day, Hillary Clinton is trying to turn around her fortunes tonight in Las Vegas. In fact, both Clinton and her main rival are in Sin City trying to convince Democrats that theirs is the safest roll of the dice for the party. Chief White House correspondent Ed Henry is also in Vegas tonight.
On the eve of her summer vacation in the Hamptons, Hillary Clinton tried to stay focused on her middle-class message at a town hall in Las Vegas, while continuing to dismiss the FBI's investigation of her email server as a partisan attack.
We have turned over the server. They can do whatever they want to with the server to figure out what's there or what's not there. That's for the, people investigating it to try to figure out. But we turned over everything that was work-related, every single thing.
Yet the mainstream media keeps rejecting Clinton's explanations. She was hammered today by liberal Washington Post columnist Eugene Robinson, declaring the candidate is her own worst enemy because she has, quote, stonewalled for so long, adding, "I wish Hillary Clinton would be respectful enough to say, I'm sorry, I was wrong. I wish she would not insult our intelligence by claiming she only did what other secretaries of state had done. None of her predecessors, after all, went to the trouble and expense of a private email server." And we're learning new details of what the FBI may be looking at in terms of the security of Clinton's email. The Daily Mail reported today the IT company that maintained Clinton's private email account, Platte River Networks, was run out of a loft apartment in Denver, and that company's servers were kept in a bathroom closet. Hardly the type of secure place for the Secretary of State's email.
I feel that she's in serious trouble and she doesn't recognize it. I can tell you this, the team of FBI investigators and federal prosecutors that are pursuing her is the highest and best in the Justice Department.
Beyond her email troubles, Clinton is also facing heat from Democratic Socialist Senator Bernie Sanders, who continues to rise in the polls and shadowed her today in Las Vegas as they both addressed the convention of the AFL-CIO at the Luxor Hotel.
I think it's fair to say, and I don't need to be self-serving here, but I think it is fair to say that there is a lot of excitement in the Bernie Sanders campaign right now.
That pressure continues to push Clinton to the left. Today, she officially broke with President Obama's decision to give Shell a permit to tap oil and gas-bearing zones in Alaska, tweeting, quote, "The Arctic is a unique treasure. Given what we know, it's not worth the risk of drilling." Now, Clinton just wrapped up an extraordinary news conference here. She said this controversy has nothing to do with me. It's about the process. She was saying it was intel agencies fighting. There's nothing new here. I pressed her, isn't it also about you leaking classified information? She said that's not clear. The State Department has not determined that. Now, NBC News is reporting tonight that the FBI is confident they can restore data on Clinton's server, even though the FBI believes that someone tried to wipe the entire server clean. I pressed Clinton on whether she tried to wipe the server. She would not directly answer that question, Shannon.
All right. We know you'll stay on that, Ed, live on the campaign trail. Thank you so much. While Clinton continues to blame her email scandal on Republicans playing politics, the man who is perhaps the most venerated political journalist of our time is likening her situation to the epic Washington scandal he helped uncover. Tonight, Chief Washington correspondent and Watergate historian James Rosen reports on Bob Woodward's comparison of Emailgate and Watergate.
As president, Richard Nixon recorded 3,700 hours of tapes, of which 18.5 minutes, less than 1% of the total, were erased by a culprit never identified. As Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton sent or received on her private server 63,000 emails, of which she tells us she herself erased 30,000, nearly half the total. The comparisons come now from individuals not typically associated with vast right-wing conspiracies.
You've got a massive amount of data. It, in a way, reminds me of the Nixon tapes, thousands of hours of secretly recorded conversations that Nixon thought were exclusively his.
It's an interesting analogy because President Nixon acted as if he was never in trouble. He was never going to be investigated. He was never going to be caught. And P.S., those tapes, they belong to me. They don't belong to the government. Does that sound familiar?
As a young lawyer, Clinton served on the House Judiciary Committee that recommended the impeachment of President Nixon. Clinton has written about listening to the so-called tape of tapes, on which Nixon could be heard listening to and commenting on earlier tapes. It's likely Clinton made no recordings when she reviewed her own emails and deleted half of them.
Well, I'm not a crook.
I will do my part to provide transparency to Americans.
Political cartoonists are also finding the comparison irresistible, yet the outside the cartoon panel thinker will ask whether Mrs. Clinton shouldn't aspire to be compared to Mr. Nixon. And Nixon's 2 presidential victories, one a historic landslide, offer the only modern precedent for what Hillary Clinton is attempting, namely to capture the White House after a highly polarizing 20-year career on the national stage. Evan Thomas is the author of the studiously even-handed new biography, Being Nixon.
I don't think that Hillary Clinton is Richard Nixon, but she has some of the same problems. And the biggest problem is that she hides things. She's secretive. That's her nature. It was Nixon's nature.
Clinton supporters note she hasn't been charged by the authorities with committing any crimes, but the controversy over her emails and the finances of the Clinton Foundation have taken a heavy toll on her poll numbers, particularly for honesty and trustworthiness. Shannon?
James Rosen live. Thank you so much, James. Up next, want another reason not to trust Iran? But first, here's what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. Fox 59 in Indianapolis, with the former face of Subway expected to plead guilty to child porn charges. Jared Fogle became famous for his massive weight loss as a college student on a diet comprised solely of Subway sandwiches. Last month, the feds raided his Indiana home as part of a child porn investigation. Fox 32 in Chicago, where Michael Jordan took the stand in a lawsuit over the unauthorized use of his name in an ad for a now-defunct supermarket. Jordan's camp says the former basketball star lost millions in endorsement revenues. Lawyers for Dominic say that vastly overstates the damage done. And this is a live look at Seattle from Q13 Fox. The big story there tonight, not your ordinary traffic stop.
Come on, baby. There you go. There you go.
Officer Anthony Reynolds pulled over that car for speeding, and the driver said his wife was in labor. That baby was not going to wait. The officer helped clear the newborn girl's airway, and she started breathing on her own. You can see the father gave those officers some grateful hugs, and his baby girl, too. That is tonight's live look outside the Beltway from Special Reports. We will be right back.